Welcome to the podcast, The Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Keith D. Terry, a consultant, a coach, and a serial entrepreneur. The mission here is to teach, inspire, and to motivate. We're here to unveil the captivating stories of triumph, resilience, and the secret recipes of success shared by some pretty remarkable entrepreneurs and individuals. You know, the kind of stories that ignite a fire within you, pushing you to reach for the stars and helping you discover the path to financial freedom. But hey, we don't want this adventure to be a solo one. Join our community, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you like what you hear today, spread the love by sharing this with your friends. After all, greatness is meant to be shared. So fasten your seatbelts, dear listeners, because the next big thing is about to take on a thrilling ride through the world of success, and we're just getting started. Today's episode was titled Business Prosperity, Unlocking Freedom and Wealth Through Successful Exits. Our guest today is Mr. Darren Cherry. Don't get it confused. He's Cherry with a C and I'm Terry with a T. Darren is the area president and of Focus CFO. Darren is an exit planner who has helped a number of businesses to be sold. So what I'd like to do before I introduce you formally to Darren, I want to talk a little bit about some of the facts and figures about the exit planning industry, because some of it might be new. Well, in 2022, there are roughly 33 million businesses in the United States, and this is according to the Small Business Administration. Now, of that number, roughly 21,139 are considered large being over $1 million in sales. In 2021, there were roughly 24,400 M&A deals. This is important for the conversation we're going to have today. And in 2022, that number reduced a little bit to 21,000. Now, the failure rate of an M&A deal is roughly, they say, and this is not me, this is based on the Statistica that I did some research on, is roughly between 70 and 90%. Now, why do I say that? Because of what I'm going to say next. An exit planner. What is an exit planner? And for those folks that don't know, an exit planner is a professional who specializes in helping business owners strategically plan, prepare for the eventual sale or transition of their business. The goal of an exit planner is to maximize the value of the business, minimize risk, ensure a smooth and successful transition. They work with business owners to create a comprehensive exit plan to address a multitude of issues like financial issues, operational issues, legal issues, and personal consideration, because many business owners view this as their baby. This is their child. They grew it. They see it. It is their identity, and selling it can be somewhat of a transition in and of itself. And I hope we get into that kind of conversation with Darren. Well, you know, exit planning really took off in the 1980s and in the 1990s because we saw a period of specialized growth and complexity in businesses, as we see now. Now, the difference between an exit planner and an M&A specialist is this. An M&A specialist is a professional who specializes in facilitating the actual sale or the acquisition of a business. They focus on the transitional or the transactional aspects of buying and selling a business. Very different than an exit planner or a value builder, which is what I am. We try to maximize the pre-sale activity so that when you get ready to sell your business, you're at a maximum sale price. Well, a couple of things, and then I'm going to introduce you to our wonderful speaker or our guest today. Well, a couple of key responsibilities of an exit planner is they have to come up with a comprehensive plan. And I can get into that. And they have to do personal readiness. They have to help the business owner mentally and emotionally prepare for the transition of their business. Now, think about it. Well, I could get in and wax poetic about selling your dream home. You know, they have to talk about succession planning, whether they're going to transition it to the next generation of family members or an owner. There is a transition that must take place, and the exit planner is prepared to fully walk them through how to think about it, plan it, and move forward. And then the final thing I'd say is the coordination with other professionals. Clearly, the exit planner is going to work with a team of professionals, such as financial advisors, attorneys, accountants, to ensure all aspects of this transition is well coordinated and optimized. Today, exit planning is a well recognized and vital business service for business owners, and one that I would employ all small businesses to start thinking about. Remember when I said earlier, there are 33 million businesses in the United States. You thought about selling, you thought about building it. Perhaps as you build it, there is a way to think about how you sell it or retain its value. And so with that, I'm going to stop and let me introduce to you Mr. Darren Cherry. Darren is a hands-on leading exit advisor. He's a C-level executive and an entrepreneur with over 35 plus years of a track record of growing, scaling, buying, and selling businesses. He uses his deep experience to help business owners visualize their businesses from the eyes of the buyer. Very important statement, so that they can transform and grow their value. In the past decade, Darren has helped entrepreneurs put, check this out, an additional $50 million in their pocket. Darren, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm fantastic, and thanks so much for having me here. I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk with your guest and get our message out regarding how owners can get closer to what I call planning their freedom.
I agree with that. So before we get into the nitty gritty, you've been good. You've been enjoying your summer and all that kind of good stuff.
You know, summers are always, they go by too fast for me.
I echo that.
You know, I have this rule, I'm in my encore career now. So for those who don't know what that means, means that your ambitions are not to work as hard. That may not be reality, but your ambitions are not to work as hard as you had before. But I sort of have this rule, and that is every time I go to a business meeting or a seminar, I got to tack on a vacation to it. You know, so my summers go by fast, man.
Well, I love that. Well, you know, as we get started, tell the audience a little bit about you, how you got started, where you come from, you know, because you just didn't show up and become a CEPA. You just didn't show up and become a CEO. Who is Darren Cherry? Tell us a little bit about it.
You know, that's a great question. I started like many of us did. I started out in a role in larger organizations. I'll say I spent over 30 years. And I can say that my career was evenly split. Half of my time was spent in finance, leading up to CFO, and half of my time was spent in operations, leading up to divisional CEO. But most of the time I spent was with organizations that were growing very rapidly. So in the last case, where I spent the last 20 years, when I started, they were probably $1 billion in revenue. And when I left, they were closer to $4 billion in revenue. Wow. Okay. And so I was fortunate that the companies grew very fast, and they did a lot of that growth through acquisitions. So as a strategist, as an M&A advisor inside of an organization, as a CFO, and then later on as the leader of a business, did quite a few acquisitions. So I always laugh and say I stopped counting, but I can tell you for every year I've worked, I've done an acquisition. So you could do the math.
Now, before we leave that, you know, life sometimes is zigs and zags. So when you were in college and coming up, and, you know, when you reflect back on your life now, is it a zigzag or is it a smooth transition to where you are right now?
It's a zig. So I went to college originally to be a financial advisor.
Oh, wow.
That was my original, and I kind of wanted to be advisors that published buy sells for companies. Don't ask me why, but I kind of read a few and I started digging it, and I said, man, that's what I want to do. And then as I got into, must have been about my junior year, I said, I had done a couple interns, and I said, I think I'm going to start in the accounting track. And so that's really how I started. My very first job was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as a cost accountant.
Wow, you too? I came at it a little differently.
Yeah.
I started in Minneapolis, but go ahead.
But I started out there, and I can remember, we were writing a budget program, and we were using the Fortran punch cards, feeding them into the machine.
You're telling your age now.
But did that, and you're always fortunate the path and the journey that you take. And so somewhere about 5 years later, I began working with an organization that was a global organization, and the parent company was based out of Japan. And working with that, all I did was M&A, because they had this goal by year 2000. They wanted to have a business presence in every country in the world.
Oh, wow.
So
what a great experience that was.
Yeah. So, and like all things, eventually when you buy or joint venture enough, you kind of have to get in and help run it. And that kind of got me into the operations fever, man. And I loved it. So I literally, at the end of my career, I could say I was equally split between those two.
Well, that's interesting. And I think which makes you the perfect person to talk about. Not only were you on the inside transactional, well, I won't even call you would you call yourself a transaction? I mean, as a CEPA, I failed if I was a transaction. That meant I bought a dog and I had to dump it. Everything else I was buying, I was trying to triple the value of it. Well, let's get into that, because for the listening folks to understand exactly, I guess where I was going, it's one thing to be with a company that has a number of M&A deals. You get to see how they look at them, especially, and this is what's going to get us into a good conversation. As a person with money in the pocket or business looking to buy, there is a viewpoint that a buyer has. And I guess you've been at the table where you've seen companies and how they're strategically searching the marketplace for those strategic acquisitions. And so how would you what would you say, or how would you, tell me a little bit about how you made that transition from once you buy them to growing the value?
Yeah. So here's the dirty little secret. The art of the deal, as we like to describe it, is only about a third of the importance. 2/3 of the importance is first having the right strategy of who you're going to acquire, but more importantly, integrating it. And so you'll see a lot of acquisitions fail, and they will be colossal failures.
Oh, yeah.
And they start out with, number one, the wrong strategy. Number two, something in the deal was wrong. And here's the deal. If you've got to get into a competitive pricing situation, there's a high probability, unless you have a significant strategic advantage, that it's a bit of a mistake.
Wow.
Because, the big issue for the deal is overpaying it. The second part of it is the terms. But where the money is made is integrating it. Companies that do a great job of integration. I mean, that was, that was GE's secret sauce, was integration.
Yes.
When they tried to do organic growth, man, that didn't work. But they were very, very good at, one, saying what fits our models, what fits our businesses, and then two, doing a great job of integrating it.
And so let me ask this. So let's have this conversation. So when earlier I said that there are roughly 21,000 businesses in the United States. Of course, you've got some startups, and, some startups come out of the gate with lots of power and value, high valuations and money in their pockets. And so as you think about the exit planning business, at what point should businesses start thinking about talking to someone like you? Because I ask that because as a value builder, there's a pre-assessment that they could take to give them an idea of their value. But as because you are a certified exit plan advisor as a CEPA, I want to give honor to that so people know who you are. When should a business owner start thinking about folks like you?
Let me answer the question two ways. Number one, let's dispel the rumor what we're doing here is it has the name exit planning, but it has nothing to do with exiting and everything to do with strategy. So I would tell anyone that it depends. The answer to that question depends. So, for example, I've been fortunate enough to work with an early stage company, but they have a 6-year runway. So they started their exit as they were also getting their funding to start the business. So from day one, they are kind of in John Warlow's model, built to sell.
Right.
I get some solo practitioners. They have to start earlier because they've got to go from a job to a business.
Gotcha.
So they've got to master this art of selling expertise, not selling time, productizing their services and standard processes. So for them, it's a little bit earlier. So the best way to think about when do you do exit planning is when are you doing the largest amount of growth in the company? When are you developing that transformational schedule? Then exit planning is just a component of the strategy, because think of it this way. There are handcuffs in businesses and there are handrails. It's a handrail to make sure you don't grow the business in such a manner that you have destroyed the value. You don't grow the business so that you have made customer concentration worse, ownership dependency worse. You can grow, and here's the thing for middle market businesses. The warning sign.
You said the warning sign?
The warning sign is this. Okay. The tools you used in Fortune 100, 500, 200 companies called share of wallet has a distinct limitation when you get to lower middle market. That share of wallet will quickly create two damaging parts to your business. Number one, it will feed you right into customer concentration. It will feed you into turning your sales folks from hunters to customer service. But more importantly, it will make your portfolio a mile wide.
Gotcha.
Instead of having a customer list a mile long.
Gotcha.
And so it's one of those things you just kind of have to be careful with.
That's interesting. I like how you categorize that answer, because having been a part of a very successful startup, we were thinking about exit from the very beginning. And I wonder if that was because of how we were funded, which plays a role. We've had some very rich VCs as part of our funding group versus some other startups. And I guess, as we peel back the onion a little bit more, are you, and maybe this is not true of your clients, but as you look around at the United States, what percentage of business owners would you say never think about selling or creating wealth or value or transitioning until it's too late? They're sick, they're old, or something like that. And that's why I asked about when should they talk to someone like you. So talk a little bit about that.
That's a great question. And it leads into another one of the sobering statistics. 50% of businesses change hands involuntarily.
Ooh, please say more.
So 50% of the businesses that are sold for one of the following 5 Ds: divorce, disability, disillusion, disagreement.
Wow.
And death. And that's why there was a very long pause. Not that I couldn't remember it.
Right.
It's just that's the sobering piece that we tend to forget. There are a certain amount of businesses that they're changing hands because the owner has passed away. And oftentimes they're not prepared. The business isn't prepared. The family isn't prepared for that. I'll give you a great example. One of the toughest businesses to have the owner die is a dental business. dental businesses lose about a third of their value every 30 days. They're unsold.
Wow. A third.
Yeah, here's why. What's the first thing you're going to do if you hear your dentist died?
Ooh, I'm looking for another dentist.
You're not going to go call that office and say, what are you doing? You're going to immediately
Right.
go find it. Because I remember it like clockwork. I was getting my teeth cleaned, and the dentist was telling me about he was selling his business. I didn't ask him who was buying it. All I did is I got in the car and I said, and my wife and I always had a different dentist. I said, honey, it's time for me to move to your dentist. Give me Dr. M's information. And in that 45-minute drive, wherever I was going, I had already called her dentist's office and arranged for them to request my records from my dentist.
Wow. So what's the best way for a dentist to, I mean, I'm of the belief that every business can be sold if packaged properly. Now, you please disagree if you must.
I would like you to clarify the terminology packaged.
Well, let me you bring up a good point. I believe that with proper work, the valuation, the EBITDA, the financial performance of a business can be enhanced. And whether it's successfully sold is a different story. I think you have lots of businesses out here who have products and services that are dead weight, but because they love them, they want to keep them. They don't grow their businesses. I mean, they don't grow their customer base. They have lackluster employees. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's pre-work or pre-sale, pre-M&A activities that can be done to raise the value and performance of the business to make it more attractive for potential acquirers.
You are dead right. So here's the thing to think about. There's two parts of a business selling. One is the business. The other is the owner. So let's take the business first. If I'm a buyer, there are two things I'm concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
Is the business attractive? And this is the one that everyone sort of gravitates towards. Oh, yeah, I got a really attractive business, right? And attractive is measured a lot of different ways. But is it valuable? Is it in a market that I can grow it? No one buys a business to be fat, dumb, and happy and keep it the way it is. If I ever buy a business from you, I'm going under the assumption that I'm going to run the business better than you did. I'm going to grow it more than you did. That's my basic premise. Otherwise, I'd never buy the business from you. So the second part of the business question for a buyer is it transferable? We call that business readiness. Is it transferable? And this is where the issue comes in. Owner's gone. Can I recreate the same cells immediately? And this is where this whole concept of how attached are customers to the owner, how much concentration is there, because you have a risky base. But more importantly, what is the standard processes? Because, I love when I hear someone tells me, they'll tell me this in passing. It takes 18 months for a sales rep to be able to produce. And I write it down and I come back to them and I say, well, one, you got a selling process error. You need to refine your selling process, simplify it, take some of this complexity out so that, within 90 days, 120 days, that sales rep can begin to create value, pay for themselves. 2-year runway is just too long. 18 months runway is just too long. Yeah, they may not be a master, but they can create value. They can start contributing. And so that is the business side. So that buyer is saying, I want an attractive business that is easy to transfer to me. And things that make it difficult to transfer, difficult to grow, makes it unattractive or at least less attractive for the buyer. Now, on the owner side, the owner has two questions to answer. And one of those is the leading cause of why only 80% of businesses listed for sale actually sell, because part of that is an owner getting cold feet. And so there's two parts the owner has to figure out. Number one, are they financially ready? No one wants in their second chapter to live life as a pauper in paradise.
Yeah.
All want to maintain the existing standard. And they will mention things that they won't do. But, here's the thing. Our cost is like a balloon. We may buy a car every 5 years after we retire, but our medical cost is a lot higher than it was before we retired. So that maintaining that standard of living is what everyone aspires to do. And there's a cost that comes with trying to do that. And you have to say, what do I have accumulated? What's my business going to sell for, just to make sure I don't have a wealth gap? I don't have a gap to achieving my freedom. So that's the owner's financial readiness. And sometimes as they're going through the process, they have an aha moment that they have a wealth gap.
And so as you're talking to these owners, is that something that you tackle pretty immediately?
That's the first part of it.
And are you finding that they are, I've seen people have buyer's remorse or cold feet.
Yeah, that's a different issue.
Go ahead.
That's a little bit of a different issue, although wealth is one of the reasons for owners profusely regretting it, selling the business. But let me go back. Let me finish up the other one. The other part of that. So we have the financial readiness, and then we have, I don't know how to put this, but psychologically ready. And here's the way to think about this. There are two sets of when you're wanting to sell your business, the reasons fall into two categories. Either you are being pushed, meaning you're running away from something, stress of the job, the long hours, or you're being pulled, moving to a different geography, writing a book, teaching, mentoring. So you're running to it.
I see.
Business owners that have a higher amount of things that are pushing them, or they're running away from the business, are likely to stop 12 months later, look back, and regret what they've done.
Those being pushed.
Yeah. Yeah, because here's the thing, they're not going into anything, so they're not fulfilled.
Right.
12 months later, they're like, man, and I would tell you, when we would buy businesses from single owners, the owner always had this non-compete agreement. And like clockwork, 12 to 18 months after that business was sold, you would get a phone call. Hey, can we go to dinner, Darren? I'm like, yeah, we can go to dinner. I'm not releasing you from that non-compete. We might have to work something else out. But you would get that because they weren't fulfilled, or they could see that they didn't have enough money. So in that case, they didn't have someone like me pushing them to sit down with their wealth manager and walk through that rule of 35 that says, hey, for every dollar I spend in any given year today, I need 35 times that to be able to retire on.
Right. And so with that said, are there some business owners that you don't, well, let me ask it a different way. Is there a size of business that you won't engage?
I won't say I won't engage. I will say that I would offer them a different tool. They can do their own exit plan. I will teach them how to do a self-guided light touch exit plan. Anybody that's under revenues of about 3 million probably just needs a lighter touch, and then to try to self-implement it. Those that are above 3 million, then they probably can afford the retainer necessary to help them, to coach them and guide them through the process. The other thing that the reason they have regret, Keith, and this one's a little touchy.
You got my attention.
Well, it's because of the structure of the deal.
Ooh.
So one of the things we always tell business owners is you have to determine before you start the process of selling your business, you have to force rank your priorities. And the 3 priorities you must force rank is highest selling price versus protecting employees versus protecting the legacy of the business.
Ooh.
You've got to rate those as 1, 2, 3 before you start, because this is the thing. It determines what type of transaction you do.
Really?
If your number 1 goal is to protect the employees,
I see where you're going.
You cannot sell to a strategic in your geography.
Gotcha.
Because they're going to do what's called the tuck-on acquisition. and all of your C-level employees are going to compete for a job, honestly, wink, wink, and become unemployed in 2 years.
Right. And so you're preparing them to make this hard stack ranked.
Got to force rank them because when you're in the heat of the battle, Keith, you become the ultimate compromiser. See, when the selling transaction is always a back and forth. I want to buy, I want to get this. You want to sell, you want to get this. But if you've got your goals straight there, then it's a lot easier. If you know you want 90% of your cash at close, then it's a lot easier. When you say price, your price is also either the highest price or the subset of that is most amount of cash up front. Some business owners love having earnouts where they're paid based on how the business performs, maybe 24, 36 months later.
Now, Darren, do you find that the owners that like that part? Because I've always found that to be a little interesting where, I understand that you sell a business, you want to stay around for a year, right? You need transition. But for those business owners that want to stay around, they love the earnout. Is that because they really didn't want to sell in the first place?
Well, yeah. So earnouts have a place if you haven't proven something. If you've got a new product, a new market you've entered in, you haven't proven it. It's not in the numbers, but it's going to get there. Then it makes sense to do an earnout. But the dirty little secret is, as much as buyers say they want you around for a while, the oil and water don't mix, baby.
Yeah, I know that's true.
So here's the deal. I have been the shot caller, the decision maker for 20 years. Turn over that egg beater timer. Because in 6 months, that sand's going to be empty. It's going to all be in the bottom because there's only so much of me saying do things or making recommendations that no one does it. I'm used to saying, hey, we're going to do this. Bam, everybody goes, runs, and they get it done. Now, it goes into this hole. It may get done. It might not even be considered. And so, it just kind of builds up. And you keep saying in the back of your mind, man, I don't have to put up with this.
Yeah.
I need to go spend more time with my grandchildren, right? So it's short-lived. I have found there have been some exceptions where folks have done a great job and they've helped businesses grow. Those are typically folks that are earlier in their career. But for the most part, that shelf life is a little short. And so, and then the favorite one is so they have this deal where you're negotiating and you're setting forth, how much do I get it closed?
Right.
Then they try to put some garbage in there to protect employees, which never works. If you want to protect employees, then use a transaction that's likely to protect them, meaning sell the company to the employee, do an ESOP or different types of transactions. Right. But here's where the owners get done a disservice. Typically, the structure, because they didn't have someone asking that important question, then they do get a deal that's structured in such a way where it sounded like a good idea at the time.
Okay.
But after the fact, it isn't a great idea.
Please tell me more. I mean, you got
a great idea. I mean, hey, I've already demonstrated this EBITDA. Why am I taking an earnout?
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Oh, here's why you're taking an earn out, because it's the upside. And then you got your advisor saying, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. So more often than not, the same advisors that helped you grow your business may not be the same advisors you use to help you sell a business. So
I believe that. I believe that.
The person that your advisor is sitting across from, I don't want a tax advisor that's done 2 sales in 20 years.
Right.
No, I want someone that's done 1 a month.
Right.
Up to date with what tax havens
Right.
exist for me to do this, right?
Well
I
said.
want a wealth manager that is used to handling the money from an owner, so they can ask those questions. Well, wait a minute. Are you sure you don't want a deferred advisors fund? We could do this over here,
Yeah.
But most importantly, the estate and the transaction attorneys, they need to be experienced doing it every day, every night, because they understand how the game is going to be played. They can coach and advise you. Yeah, I'll handle this. Don't get bent out of shape, because your advisors should do the heavy lifting, and then they ask you to come in when there's a problem. You don't sit and call the buyer on every turn of an agreement.
Yes.
On every single point.
I'm curious, in the we have roughly about 10 minutes left or so. Yep. Are you finding that the business owners are hard to get an audience with? Not because they're not interested, but because they might have their head down. They may not be thinking about it. What do you have to say about this part? Because I'd like to talk a little bit about because I assume we have some business owners that are listening, and yes, it's about you and how you talk to a person like Darren or one of his associates or even me. So what do you say, Darren?
It is, excuse me, there's really 2 parts to that one, Keith. It's not hard to get an audience with an owner, but it is hard to get an audience with an owner early enough to create a very effective exit. And I'll give you a great example. I had a client that when I started working with her, she had $1 million in her savings account, and she had business worth $1 million, property worth $1 million. She had $3 million, and she said, well, I think I need about $5 million to retire, and went through everything. And I said, yep, that's a good number, but we're going to target $8 million. And so in only 3 years, which is a little bit unusual, her $1 million had gone up to $3 million of accumulated wealth, because we're focusing on cash flow, getting a greater cash flow from that business. Her business sold for $5 million, and she still had the $1 million for the property, which is good, because she did something you should never do. She went from good old Ohio to California. So that cost of living was a little bit different, but because she had that extra amount of retirement income, it worked. So it's hard to get an early audience, number one. And then number 2, it's a little difficult to get someone to say, hey, let me invest $5,000 to $7,000 a month, for a couple years.
Yeah. I totally.
The way to think about this is when you want to grow the value of your business, then you're probably going to spend about 3 to 4% of that value growth.
Very well said.
Getting it done. And so, we try to set forth a budget that says these are the things that you want to do. And sometimes people think about, I can do this myself.
They do say that, don't they?
Very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, because think of it this way. What are you going to stop doing to free up the time to do it? That's where the fallacy is.
Yeah, that's a very, very powerful statement there. And
who do you have on your team that knows how to look at your business through the lens of a buyer?
So my last question, before I ask you to say something to the listening, is there a certain approach that business owners should take dealing with you and an M&A specialist and a banker and all the other folks that go into it? Because there are a lot of folks on the table here.
Yeah. So the biggest challenge owners have is they don't think about proactively selling their business. They get a phone call.
Yes.
Hey, Keith, I've been watching you. Your business has done great over the past 3 years. We should talk about me buying your business. That's the first time they ever think about it. Mm-hmm. And they go down this path, which for some people, it turns out successful, but for most people, it doesn't. Because what you then should do is stop the presses and then say, well, yes or no. Am I ready to sell? If the answer to that is yes, then Darren, it's great that you're interested in my company, but once I engage an advisor, then you can follow the process. Oh, no. But this is going to be cheaper and it's going to go quicker. It's not going to go quicker because it's going to, all of a sudden, you have given up control of the schedule to someone else, which is the buyer, and they will take advantage of you on that. And you will get deep into that and make concessions that you wouldn't if you had other choices. And so that's the biggest challenge we have today, is talking owners into engaging a qualified intermediary.
Gotcha. And
so sometimes they're small enough for a business broker, which is typically if you've got EBITDA under $750,000 a year, then a business broker is a great choice for you. But there are a lot of really talented boutique investment bankers that are starting at 750.
Gotcha.
And they're covering that 750 to 3, which is what was the uncovered category previously. Used to be investment bankers didn't deal with business under 3 million. Yeah. But
when I came out of business school, that was the case.
You got a lot of talented boutiques that I work with every day, and they do an amazing job in that level.
Okay. Well, Darren, we're almost out of time. I want to give you the final statement. And what would you say to the listening public?
So here's the easiest first step, is to take stock of where you are. And that starts with a business assessment. That business assessment will identify how attractive you are, how ready you are, what's your quality, what's your risk factors, and what, if you put it on the market today, is the likely price that a buyer would be willing to pay for your business. And it's a likely because there's, valuations, estimates of values, indication of values are trying to represent a proxy of what someone may pay based on what they purchased businesses in your industry for. But that'll give you your starting point. And then from there, you can decide how much of that can you do yourself, or where do you need help engaging with others to be able to execute it. Because we typically give you a business assessment, take that right into a strategic plan, and then help you with the implementation of both the strategic plan and the elements of the exit, so that we're de-risking and growth and improving the growth and the value at the same time.
Mr. Darren Cherry, thank you so much for being my guest on The Next Big Thing, Innovators on the Cutting Edge. Darren, do you want to tell them how they can reach you?
Absolutely. The easiest way to reach me is LinkedIn, or you can go to 23exitplan.com.
Thanks for listening to The Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Keith D. Terry. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support this podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and a review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on my YouTube channel at Keith D. Terry. If you want to recommend a guest, please email me at info@terryperformancegroup.com. This has been produced by your host and Jade Productions.